Earlier, we talked about the World Council of Churches disowning the doctrine used against indigenous people, so I won't go through that again. But I did take a look at the newspapers over the week and wanted to make some comments about some of the news that I came across. The one that, or the paper that I found with a bit of information that we could comment on was yesterday's newspaper, Friday. And first, we talk about the governor and what or his vision to transform Kaka'ako. And so the paper talks about this plan and all the attention being paid to Kaka'ako, especially as the state is trying to use some of the lands as a payoff to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs for the amounts of monies, approximately $200 million, that should have been paid to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs between certain years in which there was some dispute as to whether or not the office should be receiving what portion of the so-called ceded or stolen lands from the Hawaiian nation. And generally, they were saying 20% of the proceeds from ceded lands. And the question was, from what ceded lands? Did it include the Department of Transportation, and did it include all ceded lands, or only those in the inventory of the Department of Land and Natural Resources? So they've been going back and forth. There have been lawsuits here and there, up to the Hawaii Supreme Court, back to the legislature, and so finally the legislature or not the legislature, but the governor's office, this governor's office, and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs have reached an agreement and are hoping that the legislature will buy into this particular agreement, and that is for the exchange of the Kaka'ako lands. So that brings attention to what is happening to Kaka'ako. First of all, exactly what is these lands at Kaka'ako? And these are actually reclaimed lands. These lands were lands that were essentially underwater. And as a result of the lands being underwater, and they keep filling these areas up, very similar to Alawai or the Ala Moana area, that were essentially fish ponds and rice paddies and lo'ikalo. And over a period of time, they drained certain areas out, filled out other areas. So that whole area at Ala Moana are all recovered lands. So if you notice that the sand at Ala Moana Beach are a little rougher than the sand that you would find at Malaya, or what other people call Pokai. And it's because of the nature of this recovered lands, that being the case. So Kaka'ako is actually recovered lands, but many of the Hawaiians, after they left their areas in the outskirts of Honolulu or from other islands and then congregated into Honolulu, many of them stayed in places such as what I think it was called Squattersville, and that was in the Kaka'ako area. So these are reclaimed lands, but now they are highly valuable. And for Abercrombie, what he's saying, and I'm reading this from the newspaper, is let's see. Well, the news article comes from the Saturday or Friday newspaper, the Star Advertiser, and it's written by Derek D. Pledge. And I'm reading directly into part of the article. How do you address the question of not only where should we live, but how should we live in a 21st century context? The governor said in an interview on Thursday, stressing that embracing urban density could help prevent sprawl. Abercrombie, who once dismissed high-rises in the region as kennels for the rich, sees a place where people can live, work, shop, and play, relieving some of the pressures to push new development across Oahu. His hope for Kaka'ako is to blend luxury condos with less expensive housing near rail transit, commercial development with small business recreation with shoreline access for surfers and bodyboarders. So in other words, it's that blend or the mix of various activities in a particular area where residents will be close to essentially employment, services, and entertainment and the rest. This harkens back to other issues or questions that had been asked of me with regards to the issue of rail. And do I support rail or not? And my response was, no, I do not support rail. And I think what we need to do is relook at the way we are urban designing or urban developing Honolulu, all of Oahu, and the rest of Hawaii. Because as long as you need to move people, let's put people at point A and destinations at point B, and those destinations are sites of employment, entertainment, services, and the rest, you're going to have a problem of moving people from point A to point B. And the appropriate planning technique should be to put people and places that they live in and work in and receive these services should be as close together as possible so that transportation does not become an issue. I think the governor is on point here. Now, some people would say, and having spoken with Panos Privadores, he would argue that, well, Oahu is already split up into different areas. So for appropriate planning, yes, you would want to integrate. But it's too late because of the wide separation just within Oahu. And I'm saying it's never too late to begin to replan and do this kind of restructuring rather than just going ahead with the idea of rail as the best way to bring people or mix people together. There's other comments about Kaka'ako and how other people are seeing it in terms of this blend. And I do recognize we have a caller, but I won't go to the caller until we've exhausted at least this particular article. So another comment is small business owners, community activists, and surfers who have proposed some of the previous development projects in Kaka'ako, or who has opposed previous development projects, particularly along the waterfront, are concerned about the new plans. Okay, but it doesn't say anything. There's no content in that paragraph, so it's a wasted paragraph. Dexter Okada, a fish and seafood wholesale distributor who is with the Kaka'ako Business and Landowner Association, said that some businesses are worried that increased residential development would lead to conflicts and that redevelopment would drive property values and property taxes higher. Quote, we're afraid of being squeezed out of Kaka'ako. Well, it's a comment of a person's feeling, but it really doesn't add to the issue of how does one plan for an area, unless to say that just leave it alone because we are already invested in our area, we're already there, we don't want to be moved. But that's not real planning. It goes on. State Senate Majority Leader Brickwood Galateria said redevelopment in Kaka'ako will need significant buy-in from many others. Now, that's not a statement of any value because it really doesn't say anything. Although we understand that you need participation in the planning, what value does it has other than to say that you have the opinion of Brickwood Galateria that you need participation. So there's no, what do you call it, EO, there's no substance to that statement. So I'm looking for substance. He also is attributed to the statement, it's good, well, it's got to be balanced growth, it's got to be planned well, he said, but we're not looking for any Riviera in Kaka'ako. Again, no substance there, at least in the statement. I'm not suggesting that Brickwood Galateria has no substance, but the article, the reporter hasn't contained any substance in his statement. So the next one is State Representative Tom Brower, Waikiki and Ala Moana area, said involving the community early in the planning will be important. Again, it doesn't say very much. Of course, we all understand that kind of stuff. So I would suggest that there's been not too much intellectuality in the discussion of kaka'ako, except for what has been suggested by Abercrombie, at least that we should blend it in as we plan. We should have this kind of broader planning. All right. So if you would like to call and share an opinion, our telephone number here is 524-1080. Give me a call. We'll put you on the radio, and you can blast me or you can blast Abercrombie or anyone else with regards to this plan. Okay, here we go. We have a caller. Let's go to the telephone. The telephone number here is 524-1080. All right, here we go. Aloha, caller. Welcome to the program.
Yeah. Looks like everybody is against development.
Yeah, but as time marches on, things are going to change, or it's going to just stay at one stage. So the question is, should we move along with time? Should we just resist changes itself, or should we take control of change itself? And I'm not a pro developer. I've been almost arrested many times. I picketed, and we've been against certain type of development.
Yeah.
But I think there should be more intelligent voices involved if you're going to do a newspaper story. You need to ask people, what are your ideas about, and what are your visions, what are your hopes and dreams for this place? And if it is, well, just leave it alone because it looks beautiful, it carries a particular sense of spirituality, etc., etc. At least that's a substantive statement. But don't say, oh, we got to ask many other people. I'm asking you. I want something solid from you. So, my friend, what's your opinion about that? Now that I went put you on the spot.
I don't know. I'm just in the middle of a lot of things, from kaka'ako to ho'opili to a lot of different things. And both sides have, some great arguments and things like that. But I really wanted to kind of get to the rails situation, because I read a letter in the Star Advertiser saying this lady supports rail because she said that there was a train in the past that occurred, and it went from Eva to Ala Park. And I'd like to know if you knew anything about this train.
Yeah, the train essentially, and Hawaii has a history of trains. The train would go all the way from Honolulu. It would go out to Waipahu. It would pass Waipahu, go all the way out to the Everplains. It would pass that. It would continue all the way out to Waianae, and then it would go around Kaena Point. You know a place called Yokohama's?
Yeah.
Okay, you know why it's called Yokohama?
No.
Because it was called Keawe'ula previously. But Mr. Yokohama was the guy who was living there and would make sure that you had water for the train so that it could go around Kaena Point and then haul all the way back, carrying cane and going back to Wailua side and all that stuff. So yes, Hawaii does have a history of train.
Oh, so this was more like a plantation train, not a passenger train, huh?
And you had passengers jumping on the train at times. I don't know if they were hobos or what were they. But no, you did have passengers riding the train. In fact, if you go down to where's that, Kahe Point, and you have a place that a lot of surfing going on there. They call tracks.
Right. Yeah, I noticed. I see the train tracks over there.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's because of that. Yeah. So yeah, we do have a history of train, but what I've always said is that don't let history anchor us into the past.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
But use it to project us into the future. So just because elders or kupuna had done one particular practice doesn't mean we repeat the practice. Because just like us, they had done things that were really smart and things that was kind of stupid. And we shouldn't just use them as the basis of, that's the standard by which we should be measured by, simply because it was done in the past.
But at that, in the past, there wasn't buses or people hardly had cars at that particular time, yeah?
Well, of course, because of the movement or the development of different technologies. Hawaii actually had cars at a very early stage. If you look at the pictures of Honolulu, for example, you will find streetcars and you will find automobiles. I think it was before the turn of the century. At least you had the streetcars. And one guy who was a good friend of mine, he passed away quite a number of years ago. His name was Elmo Sampson, and many people may remember him if you were involved in the labor movement because he was head of the construction and general laborers movement when I was a young kid.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were good friends. I was going to the university and I had met this guy, and he was at that time the head of the labor movement.
Mm.
And he comes from actually from the what was that Kailua side, but he said I actually grew up in Liliha, and Liliha used to have these tracks, and the train would go all the way up, and it was run on electricity. And so what they would do as kids, they would get this can of grease,
Yeah.
and they would hide in a bush. And then as a train started coming and going up that long hill up in Liliha, they would run out, they would grease the tracks, they would run back. And the train couldn't go up the hill because the tracks were all greased.
Was there some sort of train around Honolulu where it kind of ran on a overhead wire or something?
Yeah, that's a kind of trains. And then we had buses. And if you remember, I don't know how old you are, but
Yeah.
I saw in the picture books. I don't remember it myself.
Yeah. Oh.
But anyway, as small kids, whenever we would come to Honolulu, coming to Honolulu was a real big day because we live in Waianae,
Yeah.
and that was an all-day trip, right, coming all the way into Honolulu. And I remember those buses with the lines above, and it would run on electricity. And it would be crossing. It was fantastic, and I was amazed at how this spring that kept touching the line, and then the buses as they turned from place to place. So it wasn't really attached, but it was just touching onto the electricity, and the buses would go back and forth. So it was a different kind of system of transportation.
So, what government funded the train and the bus at that particular time?
The train, I don't think it was funded by the government, or it may have been, but I think it was essentially funded by the sugar companies or perhaps the pineapple companies.
Oh,
The
yeah.
buses were public transportation. So you had the HRT, which was a Hawaii Rapid Transit, and you had what else? Before it turned into the bus. And what was that? There was some songs. Well, anyway, old songs that as a kid I remember people would sing about riding on the HRT, the Hawaii Rapid Transit. And then you had this Jewish visitor who came to Hawaii. You remember his name?
No.
Huh?
I'm
Weinberg.
not that old.
Hey, well, don't give me that. You're not that old. But his name was Weinberg. Was it Harry Weinberg?
Yeah.
And coming out of, I think it was Chicago, and he was an investor and came in and transferred the HRT into the bus system and got into a lot of fights with, who was that, the mayor? Frank Fosse. Oh, they had some big battles between Weinberg and Fosse, and Weinberg was seen as a carpetbagger. He would come into corporations and just rip out all of the assets in the corporations. But he knew land, he knew investments, and he knew business. So he was not seen as a very what is that honorable businessman. But people recognize him as a very good businessman. Now after Himake, then what happened? All his whole estates, he has been contributing it to support the poor. And so you have the Weinberg Foundation, and so you have these buildings coming up with his name and his wife's name on the buildings. In fact, we are beneficiaries of some of his monies to complete our building out in Waianae, and so it's named the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg building. And they always come in and they pay 1/3, not always 1/3, but they won't pay for the whole building, but they will fund it 1/3. But you got to put their names on your building. And so when Frank Fosse was traveling back and forth after Weinberg died and kept seeing Weinberg still haunting him, it would have been interesting to ask Fosse about the legacy of Harry Weinberg. Oh, they were great enemies with one another. The Filipinos had a different take on it when they developed the Filipino. What is this? Is gathering place out in Waipahu.
Yeah.
And so Weinberg says you got to put the name Weinberg in on the building. They say, yeah, but we're gonna put them on the back entrance. So there was some dispute over that treatment, but they went ahead, and I don't think there's bad blood between that Filipino organization and the Weinberg Trust. But so if you look at history and you look at what is in existence today, it's very interesting to see these changes that have occurred.
Actually, the train actually went from, I guess, the community to places of businesses, right? It went from point A to point B.
Yes, it did, but not necessarily from community to places of business, because people may have wanted to go holo holo, go down to the beach, or go down to Waianae side or other places like that.
But the island was pretty much country. Yeah, it was very rural at that particular time.
Yeah, you know, sometimes it's hard to say what is and what was rural. I was talking with what's his first name, Mr. Patey. What's his first name? He was head of Department of Land and Natural Resources. So when he was expressing having to move out to the country because his family supported Liliuokalani in trying to restore Liliuokalani, and so you have a Haole family loyal to the Hawaiian nation, but a lot of the Haoles in Hawaii didn't like the Patey family, so they had to move out to the countryside. So they had to move all the way out to Aiea and Pearl City. That's where you come from.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And I understand it was very country over there.
Yeah, at that time. So you can imagine Waianae when you talk about the Kuahivis.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mountain.
Yeah, because I assume that the train went from, one community to the business district, and, the whole island was country. But, look today, it's businesses is all over the place. Yeah, it's not like
So it really has sprawled without very much planning.
Yeah. So and also if they're predicting that the growth is going to be on the west side, there's going to be increase of population of 135,000 people, and they all going to be traveling into town.
Yeah.
I'm questioning if Honolulu is going to provide jobs for those 135,000 people. I mean, I'd like to know where all the jobs going to be in Honolulu.
Yeah.
For that.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a break with music, and then I want you to stay on the line, and we'll continue with our discussion. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, your battery not going to run out of battery, or your phone not going to run out of battery.
Yeah, I have for wireless landline.
Okay, all right.
And not on batteries.
Okay, hang on. Okay, don't run away. And this is Poka Laino. You are listening to KWAI at 1080 on your AM dial.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii, Kupa ama hope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala anunu me ka paka. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua I o mano, Pa'apu me ke oni o ka puhi hewa. Aolea e kau I ka pulima, Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi, Po o hui ai nā ku ai hewa, I ka pono sivila a o ke kanaka. Aole makoa e mina, I ka pu'ukala o ke au